Thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. So I'm sure you've heard this story in the news. A West Island high school confiscated over 900 yearbooks after a student snuck racist language into his biography. How do you talk to kids about racism and incidents like this? I'm sure you recall in 2020, a video circulated showing two John Rennie high school students in blackface. And the Lester B. Pearson School Board set up a task force on equity and inclusivity. So MYRNA LASHLEY was appointed chair of that task force. She's also an associate professor of social and transcultural psychiatry at McGill. And she joins us now. Hello, dear MYRNA.
Hello, Natasha. How are you?
I'm well. It's always so good to hear your voice.
You too.
Thank you. I'd love to just hear your reaction to this story about the yearbooks.
You know, I look at it and kids are trying to get around the system. I'm sure that when these kids, when they did this, they thought it was funny. And it's something they're looking back and say, oh, look, we got away with it. I don't think they anticipated the brouhaha that it has engendered. But, you know, kids, their prefrontal cortex aren't ready yet. They don't understand the full ramifications of what they've done and what they're doing at that age. That doesn't come about until about 25 years old. But the thing is, what are we, the parents and the teachers and other authority figures doing? How are we talking to kids about this? How are we making them understand that these are not just harmless pranks? That you really didn't get away with anything, that what you've done is created a situation of more fear, situations where you've widened the gap between people trusting each other, when in fact what we want to do is bring them together. So I think we have to sit down and talk with our kids. And you know what? They're never too young for us to have these conversations with them. I don't care what anybody else says. I see a lot of people saying, oh, don't talk to the kids about it. You're going to create divisions. My friends, the division is already there. Mm-hmm. It's by talking about it that we can mend that gap.
I remember years ago having a conversation with you about how my daughter had no sense of it, right? Like she just grew up in such a multicultural environment. She had no sense of color or anything. And I remember you saying to me, yes, but the kids of color do have that sense of it. And so it's up to us as parents to make sure that the children understand that what their reality is and what they're dealing with is not necessarily what another kid's reality is.
Precisely.
So where do you start, MYRNA? Where do you start with having these conversations?
But precisely what you just said. You know, helping our kids to understand that all realities are not the same. Helping them to the limit of their ability to comprehend that there's some people who are born and just by dint of their birth, they're born into a privileged situation. When I talk about privilege, I'm not talking about what you've got. I'm talking about what you don't have to do. So when I said to you, you know, my kids of color, black and brown kids, indigenous kids, they grow up, they are born knowing that they have to navigate the system. Your child, as much as I love her, I adore her, you know that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's something she doesn't have to do.
No.
So you, as her parent, have to help her to understand, look, your little friend Jenny or your little friend Jamal or what have you, these are situations that you need to be there for your little friend. Don't put yourself in danger, obviously not. But come home and tell mommy, come home and tell daddy, tell the teacher. When you see these things occurring, these are wrong. These are wrong. Help them to develop empathy, to understand how would you feel if this were happening to you. I don't know if you recall, I know you don't have a lot of time and I don't want to take up a lot of it, but I don't know if you recall, several years ago there was an experiment done where the teacher told half the class they had blue eyes and half had brown eyes. And the blue-eyed kids were given all kinds of privilege in the morning, and, you know, they could say anything pretty much that they wanted to the brown-eyed kids. They didn't have to invite them to play. They didn't have to do any of those things. And these little brown-eyed kids who were assigned to brown eyes, they felt so horrible and they felt so left out. In the afternoon, she switched it and told the kids who were brown-eyed, oh, now you are the blue eyes. And little blue-eyed kids, you're now the brown eyes. And the kids, through that experiment, were helped to develop empathy and understood what it meant to be the other side because they didn't feel good. And you can do that with all kinds of things. You can do that with their toys. And I mean, as I said, to the limit of their ability. You don't have to destroy the child to do it. People are afraid that you're going to, but you're not. You're trying to raise good citizens. And just as you say to your kid, don't touch the stove, it's hot. You don't say, I'm not going to tell my kid that because they might become afraid of the stove.
Yeah.
You say, look, kid, you're going to get burnt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll look both ways before you cross the street. So you can teach children from now, and that's what we should be doing.
Myrna, it's Aaron. As I hear you describe this and, the fact that parents should go ahead, take the time, make the effort, and deal with this with their children, how much of this should be happening at school that isn't happening in school?
Oh, I think a lot of it, don't forget that teachers are just human. We put teachers on a pedestal. We put all our authority figures on pedestals, and we forget that at the end of the day, they're humans, and they have been subjected to the same ethnocentricity and the same colonialism and structural racism and structural prejudices, who's homosexual, who's gay, who's not, and how you treat transgendered people. They've been subjected to the same nonsense that all of us have been. And it's a trial for us to get out of sometimes when we look at how we've been raised. It's painful for us to look at ourselves. Teachers are no different. Some of it, of course, should be taught at school, but it starts with us, and we have to demand that our teachers get the professional development that's necessary to address these things, because it's not going to happen for them by osmosis, Aaron.
Okay. I know when I ask that, I mean, in terms of, forget about the teachers, and you're right, they're all individuals. We forget that sometime. But in terms of a structured curriculum within the school system to teach this kind of empathy, that's lacking,
yes,
is it not?
Absolutely. And I know that they're looking at that at Less to Be Person. They actually have put things in place. They are really being very diligent about what they're doing. They've set up committees. They're working. They're looking at their policies. They're holding PD days, professional development days for the teachers. And I have to tell you, I've gone back. I did one about 2 weeks ago. They are trying. And we as the parents, we have to tell the teachers, this is what we expect you to be doing in school. Unfortunately, teachers are also getting feedback from some parents who are saying, we don't want our kids taught that darn CRT, critical race theory. They don't know what it is. Most people who are talking about it don't know what it is, but they're looking at what's happening in the States and say they don't want it.
Right.
What they don't realize is that critical race theory was not created for people who are lightly pigmented. It was created for black and brown and dark people and indigenous people to give them a sense of their own history and a sense of who they are and taking their place and getting them to become active in their own lives. It was never meant to be against anybody. It was meant to be for people. And so we've got to tell the teachers, we want this. We want you to be our partners in not only teaching our children the 3 R's and digital technology and all those things, but in creating moral human beings. Mm-hmm. We need your help in that, and we demand that as parents.
I mean, the goal, like you said, the goal is to have great kids that grow up to be wonderful adults, and we all have a huge role to play in that. I'm curious, Myrna, before we run out of time here, specifically about not these teenagers, but teens in general. So in this situation, we're talking about teens, like you said, they don't know the full ramifications of their actions. They think they're doing something cool and funny and showing off in front of their friends. How do you get through to that kind of age group where they just think it's funny to do something?
But that's where you do experiential learning, because didactic learning alone is not going to do it. And this is why that teacher who did the blue eyes and the brown eyes was so successful in what she did. You need experiential learning. We know that even with adults. When I'm teaching EDI, I know that if I don't put in some experiential stuff, it becomes didactic and it sounds good in one ear, out the other, and they check the box and say, yeah, we got training. But when you put them in the situation and say, okay, let's go, that's a whole different ball game. And I think that's what we need to do with teenagers, and that's how they learn best anyway.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, I hope the message at the end of all this to those students or I think there were a couple of them, right, who thought they could get away with this is more of a sit down and explanation of why this was a bad idea or a dumb idea than simply saying, you know what, we're going to ground you for a day because you did this. I'm not sure there's much to be gained by that.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's not much to be gained. And I hope that the parents aren't, smiling at their cute little kids and say, it's a wrong thing to do.
But,
you rascal,
you've got a role to play, parent. Play it.
Myrna,
because
thank
you're
you.
looking at a future generation.
Very much appreciate the
Myrna.
time as always this afternoon. Myrna, thanks so much.
Take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Yeah, so you've known Myrna for a long time, right?
I adore her.
Yeah.
She's
lady.
She's my go-to on so many things, but particularly any kind of racialized incidents. She just brings a wisdom. She makes us aware of things that we weren't aware of in a way that is non-judgmental, and then you truly can learn. Like you heard how she said, if I do it this way, it just goes in one ear, out the other. I check the box, but she makes it so that you can actually see yourself in the scenario and learn to adjust your behavior.
So down to earth, so rational. Great having her on.
She is an associate professor, by the way, of social and transcultural psychiatry at McGill, and
all right,
just an awesome all-around human being.